Mr. Boyd Fowler.
Hey, Nora.
You can move this too if you want.
Okay, I'm good.
If you need to.
Okay.
I think I'm good to go too.
All right.
So
So how does this work? You ask me questions, I give you answers, and that's how it goes.
that's right.
Back and forth.
We're
Okay.
gonna do a lot of talking.
It's like a normal podcast.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It's basically to get people's question answered
Okay. All right.
and to get your expertise.
Sure.
So there's no pressure on your answer, but feel urged to give detailed answer.
Okay, that's fine. I've never done one before, so I'm a podcast virgin.
That's funny. Are you good with the mic?
Yeah.
You can move it closer if you want.
No, I'm good with the mic.
Perfect.
Is this okay for you?
Yeah, it's perfect for me.
All right. Is it good with their cat? Is it okay if the cat comes by?
Yeah.
I like cats, so I'm good with cats.
She's watching something.
Yeah, she's looking for a bird or something because there's possible food out there.
Yep.
Anything flying looks like it's something edible.
Yeah. Oh, look, it's in her nature.
Of course, that's how all cats are. That's a good cat is a hunter.
Do you have cats?
I have two.
What's their names?
Nico, and then our cat that's outdoors, I just call the outdoor cat. So here's the thing, Nora. So about, 3 or 4 years ago, there was this cat that would just be outside every once in a while. And this cat would catch birds or rats or other things and would eat them on the front lawn.
Would eat them?
You would eat them, yeah. And so my wife was like, well, this cat looks hungry, I mean, it's not,
Because it's eating other animals.
Yeah, outside. And she goes, well, maybe we should just feed it. And so I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. It's up to you. You're the wife. You take care of those things.
You're the boss.
Yeah, you go. And so she started feeding the cat. And the cat would eat food outside, right, but would never come inside. And then over time, the cat got more and more friendly, to my wife and then to me. And then now the cat spends half the time inside, half the time outside. And, she sometimes still hunts. Every once in a while, she'll bring us a rat or a mouse or a bird. But in general, she doesn't eat them anymore. Now, usually she just eats her, cat food. Yeah, and she doesn't get along super well with the indoor cat.
She does not?
No, she does not. My indoor cat is a male. He's much older, probably maybe 10 years older than her.
Wow.
A Siamese cat. And he's 14 to 15. I think he's 15 now. And he's an old man. And they don't get along that well, but they put up with each other.
How old is she?
She's probably I'd say 5. Because she was very young when we first found her.
Okay.
And so she's maybe 5. So she's not an old
Do you know her family history? Or?
No, not really. So there's one thing we do know. So she got injured once. She had a fight and got some cauliflower ear. And so you would expect my cat to get a cauliflower ear. And so she goes to the vet. My wife takes her to the vet. With my son, because I was at work or whatever, and she was injured. They took her there and gave her a shot of, antibiotic, and they stitched her ear up and did stuff like that. But when they checked the cat, they found out that she was actually, what do they call it, chipped.
What?
You know how you can chip a cat.
You're
right?
kidding.
No, she was actually...
This wild cat is chipped.
This wild cat was chipped. So this wild cat was owned by someone. Okay, and so my wife somehow got the contact information for the person that owned the cat before. Mm-hmm. And it ended up that the people who had the cat moved to a farm in Sacramento.
Okay.
Okay, and when they left, they couldn't find the cat.
You're joking.
No, I'm serious. Because it was an outdoor cat even then. And they couldn't find the cat. And by the time they left, they just left. And so the cat obviously lived on its own for, 3 or 6 months and somehow found our neighborhood and started to, hunt in our neighborhood. And since I live, so where my house is, mm-hmm. there's a big creek right next to that. Well, that creek is a big travel spot for animals, right?
It is.
Oh, yeah. So we have, raccoons, and there'll be rats, and there's all different kinds of animals up and down there. And so it was obviously a reasonable, good hunting area for her. And so that's why she came.
Even for cats?
Even for cats. Oh, yeah. Because, cats love to catch mice and rats. And those are tasty morsels for them.
Really?
Oh, yeah. So, which is great, because I hate rats and mice. And so it's good that, so I like to have the cats around. And that's one of the reasons I really like cats, is that if you have a cat in your house, you will not have mice.
Does she get along with your dog?
Yeah, relatively well. My dog...
Happy dog.
My dog is an old dog, so she's 9 years old. She's a Rottweiler.
Oh, wow. A what?
Rottweiler.
A what?
Rottweiler.
What is that?
So a Rottweiler is a style of dog that's traditional from Germany. It's kind of like a farming dog, big, strong dog. But she had bad genes. My wife decided she would get a rescue dog. So someone had a dog, and she liked Rottweilers, and it was a little puppy, and she said, "Well, we'll take it." And I was like, "Okay, all right." So we took the dog, and that's not that I dislike dogs. Okay, I'm good with dogs and cats. I grew up with both of them, so I was fine. It's just unfortunate that the dog my wife selected was quite ill. It had hip dysplasia.
What's that?
So it's essentially when the cartilage in between your bones and is really not there.
Oh.
And so you know what it's like when your knee was dorked up,
Yeah,
right? So
Yeah, I
that's
do
what
know
it's
that.
like. So she has a hard time walking.
Poor
and
dog.
She had bad eyes. She has not very good smell. So dogs usually have great sense of smell
Poor dog.
and have great eyes.
Poor
We
dog.
we got her cataracts removed, so she sees better than she used to. But she's still, I mean, with the dog, I've had dogs where, like, literally, you drop a piece of food and you can't find it. You let the dog in, and that dog will find it no matter where it is. My dog, I can take a piece of meat, and if I put it like 1 inch under the couch so she can't see it, she can't find it.
Wow. Wow.
So her nose definitely does not work like a normal dog. But anyway, the dog and the cat get along pretty well overall. The dog sometimes barks at the cat. I don't think the dog loves cats. And but the cats are okay. They kind of, they have places where they jump onto, like a table or something, and they look at the cat dog and,
They mess with him.
yeah, smack them a few times and say, you can't get me up here anyway because you're old and sore.
And she's faster
Yeah.
and more wild.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, boy, tell us about the time you were born. Like, where were you born? How were you brought up? What schools did you go to?
Sure.
What kind of environment did you grow up in,
Okay.
at home and outside the home?
So I grew up in LA, okay, and I grew up in a couple places in LA. So initially, I was born in a place called Panorama City, okay, and after living a little bit in Panorama City, my parents moved to a place called Canoga Park. Canoga Park, and it's kind of in the hills in the San Fernando Valley in LA. Okay, and LA has many different valleys. There's San Gabriel, there's this San Bernardino, there's San Fernando. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, which is kind of north of the central part of LA. Okay, and so I lived in Canoga Park from when I was, I don't know, maybe 1. So I don't really remember being in Panorama City, but my parents were there. And then I lived there until I was, I want to say 7 or 8, okay? I'm trying to think, can I remember the name of every school I went to? I think I went to Highlander Road Elementary School.
Okay,
When I
good
was
memory.
that age. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think that's where I went to school. And I lived in a very hilly area. And I remember, I have a couple really good memories during that time. One was, so the street I lived on was a very steep hill all the way down, all the way to the school. And it's about, probably now, a little less than half a mile. Okay.
Okay.
And I remember I had to walk to school, and I would come back, and I would always complain to my mom that, it's such a long walk, and it would be hot, and and all those things, especially from school when I was like in kindergarten. And I remember one year my grandfather came to visit, and he was there, and I came back from school, and it must have been near the end of the school year. And my grandfather was probably 80-something at the time, okay? And, I get back and I'm complaining to my grandfather. I'm like, I had to walk all the way uphill, and it was, like a mile. I forgot how long. Probably like half a mile, maybe less. I was young then and small, and so everything seemed like it was bigger and farther.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was a distance for me. And my grandfather sat me down and he said, "Boyd," he goes, "when I was a boy, he goes, my shoes always had holes in them, and he goes, I had to walk uphill both ways in the snow to school."
Oh my God.
And so and my grandfather grew up in a town called Methil Hill in Scotland.
Scotland, Ireland?
In Scotland.
Ireland.
No, Scotland. Scotland is a country. So Ireland, Scotland, England, they're kind of part of the UK.
Wow. So in Europe.
Yeah. And so my grandfather told me this story, right? And so but it bothered me, and I would think about this. I'm like, how did he walk uphill both ways in the snow to school? And I used to think, and I thought about it a lot. And my grandfather left, but I was kind of afraid to ask him. And then later, I don't know, a few weeks later, I asked my mom, I go, Mom, how is it possible that you walk uphill? Because I'm thinking, I walk downhill to school and I come back up. And I'm trying to figure out how you get uphill both ways. And my mom's like, Grandpa was just saying that when he grew up, life was a lot harder than it is for you. Mm-hmm. And so appreciate the things that you have. And just know that, you have nice shoes and that you have clothes and it's not really cold where we live. Mm-hmm. Okay, there's not snow on the ground. Mm-hmm. So just know that it could be worse.
It can.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, okay, that's a good point, Mom. And so it's one of the first times in my life where I kind of realized that, maybe the way I lived, maybe people in other places in the world live differently. Mm-hmm. And because it was the first time, and I recognized also that my grandfather, even in his deathbed, had a very thick accent. Right?
Oh, wow.
And it was very hard for me to understand him.
English?
Scottish accent. Mm-hmm. And
is it a different language?
Yeah, it's not a different language. It just has a very thick accent. And so, I don't know, like, instead of calling someone a small boy, in Scotland they call you a lad. Mm-hmm. And so my grandfather would call me a lad all the time, right? And instead of calling it a sweater, he would call it a jumper. And I'm like, what's a jumper? And when he would call a wall something, he'd call it a waz.
A waz?
A waz.
I don't get it.
I didn't get it either. But a waz is a wall.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I'm like, what's a waz? And that's... So anyway, that was my first recollection. After I grew up in that area, my parents moved because my father worked at a high school in Van Nuys, okay? Mm-hmm. And he had quite a drive. And so he decided that it would be better for him to move a little closer. So we moved into a different neighborhood it was in Northridge. And so Northridge is kind of in the middle of the San Fernando Valley. San Fernando Valley is a pretty big area. I would say it's maybe 12 miles by 12 miles, kind of on average kind of size. Maybe it's bigger, but it's about something like that. And so we moved to, and I think I was 7 or 8 when we moved there. And I went to an elementary school called Andesall, I think is what it was called. Anyway, and new elementary school, new kids, new things. It was kind of a different thing. It was an okay neighborhood. It wasn't a great neighborhood. Some parts were okay, and so I went there, made friends, had fun. That was probably a pretty reasonable time in my life, as a whole. And so I finished there, and then I went to Patrick Henry Middle School. Okay. And Patrick Henry was good. I had a fun time there overall. I was trouble, though. I started to become kind of a difficult child when I was in middle school. I would fight a lot. I was difficult. And so I was difficult with the teachers. I was always a good student. So school for me was always very easy.
Wow.
But I was difficult. And just let me give you some examples. So, math was always very easy for me, right? And so I would often not really do my homework, okay? But I would come and take the tests, and I would do very well on them. And, because of that, sometimes the teachers would be pretty unhappy with me, right? Because, I would...
wasted talent.
Yeah, and also I was kind of mean to the teachers. I had a very strong memory, and I was very good with a lot. So, perfect example, my math teacher. And when I remember, in middle school, I think it was 6th grade, I had algebra. So I'm sitting in the algebra class, and the teacher who's teaching it, she's doing things, and if any possibility I could correct her, I would. Right, and so I would be the kid who would be like, no, that's not right, and I would stand up and I'd say, no, it should be, and I look back and I say to myself, I shouldn't have done those things, but I was just difficult. I was trouble, and and it was something that I'm not proud of. I'm not really, I'm not proud of it, and it's kind of embarrassing for me to kind of tell you the story now, but it's really true. I was a difficult child, and that was when I really started to realize that I'm a difficult person, and it was hard for me. I had a lot of kind of I guess I was just a relatively aggressive person, kind of personality wise, and so I took it out on my teachers, and I fought a lot with the other kids, and so it was kind of during middle school was kind of my time to kind of develop kind of some of the characteristics that I would have for the rest of my life. Okay, and that was an interesting time. I was that kid. I mean, let me give you a different example. So I get into trouble at Patrick Henry. Okay, and I'm sent to a different school. Okay, and I go to a school. I go to a cool school called Pacoima Junior High School. Okay, and this high school is a very tough school. Very tough. Lots of gang violence. Lots of people get killed. I mean, this school, I think I've told a story to you many years ago. I show up at school one day, right, and the school is closed.
Yeah.
Okay? And the school is closed because a gang member had been killed.
Oh, wow.
And so he's face down, dead guy, and they're like, well, students, got to wait. We have to get all this cleaned up. The police are there, and it's all the stuff, right? And so, I mean, I don't stick around. I actually left and went. But you were supposed to stick around. And so I go to this school, and even at Pacoima Junior High School, I get into trouble. And I'm sent to another school. I go to San Fernando. But at San Fernando Junior, I was okay. It wasn't a problem. But my father at this point was very upset with me. Very upset. Because my father's a school teacher, right? And he's a high school coach, and
What did he coach?
he coached soccer, and so he also did coach track and field and some football. And so my father was very active, in coaching when I was a boy. And but he knew all the teachers at different schools, and it's very embarrassing for him, right? So his son gets in trouble all the time. He's fighting. So my dad decides that there's a middle school right next to his high school. It's called Mulholland Junior High School. And so I go to school there. And so he transfers me. I didn't get in trouble at San Fernando. I just got transferred. And I went to Mulholland Junior High School. And it was, it was rough because my father would come and check on me all the time. He was the one who picked my classes. He's like, you're going to get this teacher and this teacher and this teacher because I want to make sure that you're doing the right thing. And I had a tough year. I had a really tough year there because my father would check in on me all the time. He was very tough on me. And, I remember there was an exam, and it was a biology class. And I remember the exam was what was it? It was like for the kind of the next level of science for the thing. And I was always a top student, okay? And so, but I was just grumpy. I was pissed off at my dad because he had been really rough on me in the morning about how I needed to work, do all these things. And so I decide that I'm going to, when I take the exam, I just mark down A. It's it's one of those Scantron kind of things, right? I just mark A all the way down on all sides, and I hand it in after like 1 minute. And the teacher goes, do you think you're done? I said, yeah, absolutely, I am done. And I had it to her, and I'm like, I gotta go, and she's like, no, you can't leave. And I'm like, yeah, I'm leaving. I'm just, because I was pissed off, right? And I was trouble, right? I was a difficult kid. And so, I get in trouble for this. My father's really mad. He's like, yeah, you got 20% on the exam.
Wow.
So, and hey, your normal grades are, like 95. And so there's something. So we had a big issue with it. And I said, Dad, listen, I don't want to go to school here. I don't want to, he says, listen, he goes, unless you clean up your act, and he goes, you decide to kind of do the right thing here, you're stuck. You're going to be stuck right next to me. And then when you go to high school, you're going to go to my high school.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, oh man, this is not good. This is really, really bad. And so I kind of have a, should I say, kind of an epiphany where I'm like, okay, I gotta kind of change things. I gotta make sure that this is not my lifestyle, because this is not getting me where I want to go, right? I'm not happy. My dad's pissed off at me all the time. My parents are unhappy with me, and it's not that I'm trying. I'm just being difficult, right? Every time there's a situation, Nor, I get into trouble. Like another great example. So I'm at Mulholland Junior High School, right? I'm there with all the kids, and I don't know, I'm playing soccer or something, and I'm with a bunch of Hispanic kids because usually my neighborhood, most of my friends were Hispanic, okay? Mm-hmm. And so there's a bunch of kids playing basketball, mostly black kids, okay? And they come by and they're like, yeah, soccer sucks. And I'm like, soccer doesn't suck, man. I said, basketball sucks. You guys are just idiots that you play basketball, But these kids are bigger than me. They're stronger than me, okay? And one of them, comes over to me and he's like, yeah, I want to fight. And I'm like, yeah, hell yeah. Let's do it.
Oh, my God.
Okay, and so... But I'm kind of an idiot, right? And so I'm still young, and I think that this is one-on-one, me and this kid, and this kid's a lot bigger than me, right? He's actually about my size, and so I figure, okay, well, he's the smallest of all the guys. Yeah, I'll take you on, sure, man. I'm gonna knock you out, and so I said, okay, let's go behind the the handball courts, and we can fight there. Right? I'm gonna show you who's who, and so I get out there. Right, and this kid, at first it seems like it's going to be a fair fight, right? There's just me. There's one guy who came with me, but there's like 5 guys that came with this guy, right? And so I get a hold of him, sock him in the head a couple times. He's kind of dizzy. Then I grab a hold of his neck, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to choke your ass out, man. I'm going to fuck you. And so, because I'm kind of mean, okay? And so really I'm choking this guy up, and then his friends get worried, like I'm going to kill him, right? And so they grab a hold of me and just beat me senseless. I mean, frick, I have black eye. My ribs are bruised. I am dorked up.
Wow.
And after that, I remember I go home. My dad's like, black eye. He looks at me and I'm like, yeah, I fell on a doorknob, Dad. Because my dad would be ripping pissed if I fought. Ripping pissed at me, okay? And he knew I fought all the time because, I'd get in trouble and he'd have to come pick me up from school and blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, I fell on a doorknob, Dad. But I learned a very important lesson then. I learned this lesson that, you know what? I don't win all the fights, okay? And if I open my mouth and say the wrong thing to the wrong person, they're going to kick my ass. And I need to realize that maybe sometimes I should be a little bit more diplomatic. Independent if I think basketball is the greatest sport or the worst sport or whatever. Maybe I should just keep my mouth shut. If they say, soccer sucks or wrestling sucks or whatever, I can just say, yeah, okay, that's great. Have a good day. And I learned a lot. And I would say that when I was there, I kind of came to another, realization that maybe what I need to do is kind of keep my mouth shut a little bit more. Because here's the other thing, Nora. You maybe notice even from the podcast. Talking is not hard for me, right? And when I was a kid, I was a big talker. But a lot of times what came out of my mouth wasn't maybe the right thing.
Interesting.
Okay. And so then, I finished middle school, and I go to high school. And, in high school, I'm pretty active. I do a lot of different things. But I've kind of decided that, I'm going to do it differently. I got to get ready for college. I'm going to, and when you take, at least where I went to school, when you kind of take the exams for high school, okay, they put you in placement. I did well on all the exams, right? So they placed me in all these top classes.
Wow.
So that's not a problem. So I'm good. And so I decide, all right, I'm going to study. I'm going to work hard. And again, work hard is kind of a relative thing because when I'm a kid, I feel like, okay, I never have to study and I do well. So anyway, so I go to high school. I feel like, okay, and where do I go to high school? I go to Granada Hills High School, okay? Mm-hmm. And I'm really happy because I don't have to go to my father's high school, okay? And I feel like, all right, this is going to be great because if I go to my
How did you let you go somewhere else?
Well, I tried to convince him that, listen, Dad, I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to be a good guy. I'm not going to be a total jerk off. And, give me a chance. I want to go to school at the local high school. I don't want to go to school with you because all the kids are going to know me. And then, he's just like, well, you haven't really shown me, blah, blah, blah. But I somehow convinced him, kind of the summer between middle school and high school, my father needed some help, like painting the house and doing other things. And I said, all right, Dad, I'll help. And so I did a lot of stuff around the house with him.
Cheeky.
And he kind of was like, all right, I'm going to give him a chance. And so I really kind of turned it around in high school. And, I study, I'm active in almost everything. So I kind of try to stay out of trouble. I'm not fighting a lot. It's not that I never fight. I had a little bit of issues, but usually it was other people starting it, not me usually. But in general, I tried to really be active in, sports. I tried to be active in music. I didn't do a lot of, I didn't join the debate team or the math team. Some of these things that maybe I could have done, but I didn't do those. But in general, I was pretty active in high school and enjoyed it. Okay, and so for me, high school was a pretty good time. I was better. I'd kind of figured out things more. I had kind of decided that, I needed to get my life kind of going straight in one direction and not kind of being as difficult as I was. And so that was a good time for me. And so high school went well. And then, it was time. So, by the time I get to be 11th grade, I start to think about, okay, well, where am I going to go to college? What am I going to do? And what am I going to study? So when I was a kid, I was always very interested in electronics. And from when I was very young, I was a kid who could repair things like televisions and radios and stereos and all different stuff. Actually, half of my friends when I was a kid would ask me to come over to their house and say, my stereo is not working right. And I don't know what's wrong with this. And so I would come over and fix their stereos. And so and back in the day when things were, well, let's put it this way, much simpler than they are today, it was easy to do it, right? I could pull the vacuum tubes out, figure out which ones weren't working properly, change the vacuum tubes, and they would work. Or I could figure out, capacitor had blown, and I'd pull it out, desolder it, put a new one in. And it was clear to me from when I was a kid that I liked engineering. And it was something that was easy for me. I enjoyed doing it. And so when I get to high school, I realized, all right, well, I'm going to be an engineer. And probably electrical engineer because that's what I was good at and it's what I like to do. And, like, for example, when I played guitar and when I was in middle school and high school, I bought an amplifier that was completely damaged. It was actually an old, what was the name of the brand? It was called a Benson amplifier. It was a copy of a Fender amplifier. And it was not a bad amplifier, but it was completely damaged. And I got it for almost nothing because as a kid, I had very little money. My family weren't wealthy. My mom didn't work, and my father was not great with money. And he was a school teacher, so he wouldn't make a lot to start with, and then he wasn't good with it. He was always trying to invest in something that went bust or some other thing like that. So anyway, I was very, interested in playing guitar. So I get this amplifier and I pay like $20 for it. Okay. And even back in the day, $20 was pretty cheap for an amplifier. And so I get this thing, but it's completely damaged. Someone kept it in the garage. There was leak. The water leaked into the amplifier. It was all damaged. So I took it apart, found new tubes, replaced the tubes, redid a lot of wiring, cleaned it up, did a whole bunch of stuff to it. Okay. Luckily the speakers weren't damaged. And that was my guitar amplifier when I was a kid.
Wow. And
I used it, for the band. I used it for the choir. I used it for all different kinds of things when I was a boy. And, it's just, that was something that was kind of natural for me. And so I decided when I was in high school, I'm going to be an engineer. And then I had to figure out, okay, well, where am I going to go to college? What am I going to do? And that was a tough time for me too, because I didn't have a lot of money. And, it wasn't like my parents were saying, okay, sure, whatever college you want to go to, we'll figure out how to get you there. My dad had the simple thing. He said, listen, son, you're going to need a scholarship, either, play soccer or play some sport, whatever it's going to be. And, that's the way you need to figure out how to pay for college. And so, so that was a big deal. And when I was a boy, I did play a lot of different sports. And probably though the best sport for me, to be honest, the one that had the biggest opportunity to get a Division I scholarship was soccer. Okay,
Wow.
I was very good. And I'm old now, so it may not be obvious that it was true back when I was a kid. But I was pretty good. I was fast. I was very coordinated, and had great stamina. Okay, and so when I was a boy, I was good. I was part of when I was a senior in high school, I was LA All City, and so I mean that's the way it works back in the day. It's different than nowadays. But anyway, and so I had a lot of Division I schools who were poking around talking to me, and I was
Yeah.
offered multiple Division I scholarships, including to places like Penn State and to Boston University. And I was very excited to try to go, but the big issue for me was simple, was that even though there was a scholarship offered, it didn't cover everything. My family couldn't afford all the things. I was afraid to take a scholar. I was afraid to take any money, from a loan, because my family didn't have money, right? So I was like, listen, if I take a big loan, how am I ever going to pay it off? And it was a very stressful thing. And now that I look back, I say, okay, I've made enough money in life that I could have taken whatever loan and I would have been fine. But at the time, I was very apprehensive, and I was like, "Listen, I grew up without money. I don't see, I can't imagine having $100,000 loan when I just graduated from college. That's like more expensive than the house my father bought.
Wow.
The house I grew up in, just to give you an idea, my father bought that house for $37,000.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, so he
Oh
bought, he
my
bought the home for
goodness.
$37,000. Okay, and so for me to think about having $100,000 debt,
That's insane.
it was just like I can't imagine how I could do it. So it was tough. So although I did travel to visit many of these schools that I had been offered scholarships to, in the end I decided not to. And so for undergraduate, I went to a local school. Okay, I went to a school called Cal State Northridge. Okay, and it was just the local school close by because I could afford it. And the first year I lived at home, and it was easy. I could basically walk to school. It was that close.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not kidding. I mean, walk is I would run, but yeah, I could. And technically, back in those days, I would run, over to the campus, run around campus, run back, so I could get enough mileage. And so it was very close. It was easy for me to do. It was low cost because I was an in-state California resident, and so it was something that it worked out for me. I studied engineering. I did really well in school. Okay, and still at school I was pretty active. I played sports and I did all different kinds of things. It was a good time for me. It was a time when I was a double major. I majored in music as well as in engineering.
Oh wow.
And so, Nor, I mean, I was a kid too back then, and I had a part of my brain say to me, maybe I could be a musician. This would be awesome. I would love to be like, a rock star or something kind of thing. But the truth was that I just enjoyed playing music. So I thought, okay, I'll be a double major, it'll all work out. And while I was there, I remember my first year, so I play guitar. And, my first year I have a guitar recital because as part of a music major, for most music majors, you have a recital each year as a function of whatever instrument you have. If you play the piano, you have a piano recital. If you sing, you have a singing recital. Play guitar, blah, blah, blah. So, of course, I play guitar. And, my parents come, which I was kind of surprised, but they decided they would come to my recital, and they listened to the whole thing. It finished, and it wasn't just me. There were other people who gave recitals too. It's kind of a group thing especially when you're a freshman. And so I finish, and afterwards, there's a little kind of reception thing, and there's some food and drink and blah blah blah. And my father comes up to my professor, and he's like, oh, that was nice. He goes, and the first thing he asked him, he goes, is he going to be able to make any money being a musician?
Oh
That's the
my
first thing my
God.
father said. And of course, I'm terribly embarrassed, and I'm kind of stressed by the whole thing, and it's pretty rough. But my father made a good point, and I was upset about it. To be honest, I was very pissed off. But there was something else that had happened that year that was kind of a big deal for me, that told me something very interesting about myself, and it was so. So I take this one class. It's called sight singing. And for me, it's a very hard class.
What is it called?
Sight singing. And so the idea behind it is very simple, right? Is that you get a sheet of music and you have to sing it. And so the professor hits the first note, middle C or whatever, and then you sing the whole thing. Okay? And they grade you on how precise you are, both in timing as well as in tone. And every mistake you make, they check it down, all right, and you get some grade for it. And it's hard. And, the exam comes from a book that has like 350 different songs in it. Okay?
Wow.
So it's hard. You can't memorize 350 different songs to be ready for this, right? So you have to kind of practice the technique, of how you do sight singing. And for me, it's hard. Maybe for some people it was very easy. Actually, for some people it was very easy. And so it's one of those things that, I studied a lot. And for other classes, I might study, I don't know. Let's say for final exams, I study for, 4 or 6 hours, whatever. This thing, a couple days, solid studying.
Wow.
Working my butt off, okay? And we go to final exams, and I remember I sit down, and I get called kind of in the middle, of the group. I'm not the first guy, I'm not the last guy. And so I get up there and I sing, and I do okay, and I think I get an A- in the class, but I'm killing myself in this class. This is a hard class for me. And I also take music theory my first year. And so music theory is easy. It's like, yeah, no big deal. I get an easy A in that class. I don't have to work too hard. It's not bad. And there's a woman, okay, who is in our music theory class, okay. She doesn't come very much. She's drunk a lot, she's kind of interesting, and we don't know that much about her. She doesn't show up, but she comes to our study group for music theory because she's not terribly good at music theory. And so anyway, but I don't know her well. I just see her every once in a while. And then I realize she's in my sight singing class, okay? And so she's in the sight singing class, and the most incredible thing happens, right? She gets there late. She gets there after the exam starts, and it's incredible the professor doesn't fail her, but he's like, okay, whatever. She sits in the back, and she kind of looks disheveled, like, she had just woken up like a second ago, or maybe she had slept in the gutter. I don't know. And she smelled like alcohol, as usual. And so we're all kind of laughing. We're like, oh, she's going to get her ass whipped. Man, this is going to be freaking embarrassing. And she gets called, not last, but, near the end. And they call her. She comes up. And the most incredible thing happens. She gets... Well, I wouldn't say super hard, but not super easy either. And, the teacher said, no, we're all kind of getting ready to laugh. And this woman, she sounds like, she's like a song. Her voice is like an angel, okay?
Wow.
All right? And she sings a song perfectly, every single note. It's like, it's just shocking. It's just shocking to look at her, and I'm just like, and I look at all the other guys, and I'm like, she's the one from the, music theory class. You remember her? And everyone's like, yeah, I remember. She's just incredible. And at that moment, all of a sudden, I had this epiphany again. I'm not really a musician. I mean, I love music. I love to play guitar, all these things, but I don't have that natural talent. I enjoy it. I love it, but it's not the thing for me. There are things I have natural talents for. That's not one of them. And so it's a great piece of knowledge, because at that point I said to myself, all right, being a music major, double major, doesn't make sense. Maybe I'll be a music minor. That'll be fun. I can take a bunch of music classes, and I'll really focus on engineering. Because for me, engineering was easy. Engineering was obvious. It was a natural talent. So anyway, so that's what college looks like for me, right? And then after I finish college, I graduate first in my class.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. So
good for you.
So I did well. I was a good student. And now I decided, okay, it's time for graduate school. What am I going to do? Okay. And So I have the same quandary as I did before. I said, listen, I can't go to grad school unless I get money. It's impossible for me to go.
That's the issue I'm dealing with now.
Okay.
Which we both know.
Yeah, I know very well.
Yeah.
And so I'm having a tough time. I'm really stressed by this. So I apply to all the usual suspects. I apply to the UC schools and no Cal State schools because they didn't really have PhD programs. I wanted a PhD, so I applied to UCLA and Berkeley and UC San Diego and a bunch of things. And of course I applied to Stanford and MIT and a bunch of other places too. And I kind of don't expect things to work out very well for me, right? Because I kind of figure, well, if I don't get a scholarship, I'm kind of stuck, and probably my only option is to go to UCLA and then drive from home to UCLA back and forth, which is a long drive. It's like an hour plus drive each way.
Oh, wow.
And I thought to myself, all right, well, that's worst case. That's what I'm going to do. And so anyway, I apply and I get accepted most places, actually. So I'm pretty lucky, but not everywhere offers me any money. I get a good offer from UC San Diego. They offer me a full scholarship.
Oh, wow.
So I'm pretty much like, okay, I guess I'm going to UC San Diego. I guess that's the place. And all I was going to have to pay for was housing. And I thought, okay, graduate school, it won't be that much. I'll figure out how to deal with this. I'll get, 11 roommates or whatever. and it'll work out. And so, I visit, and they treat me really well. They're super nice. They were really great to me, to be honest. And then, but I'm like, I really would rather go. I didn't really decide I want to go to the East Coast. I was kind of feeling like I'm going to stay here. But I really wanted to go to Stanford. That was the thing. I had been accepted, and so I fly up here, and my aunt lives in the local area. She lived in Menlo Park. Okay, very close to Stanford, walking distance from Stanford.
Wow.
Which was nice for me because I lived with her at first, but I'll tell you the story when I get to it. And so anyway, so I get to Stanford and to talk to people, and I meet a bunch of professors, and one of the first professors I meet, and I won't mention names because I don't want people to feel anything negative here, but I meet the first one, right, and I talk with him, and he's like, oh, okay, so where did you go to school before you kind of, decided to, or we were accepted to Stanford? I said, oh, I went to, Cal State Northridge. And he's like, oh, you'll never make it here.
Wow.
It's not going to work out. People from that school never work out here. And I'm like, wow. I said, and I was pretty grumpy about that, and I thought, oh, well, Stanford's not going to work out. And then, I talked to a couple other professors, and some were nice, but then I met a guy. His name was Tom Cover, okay? And Tom Cover was in a place called the Information Systems Laboratory, and he was, unfortunately, he's passed now, but a remarkable person. I mean, he's the whole reason I went to school there. And when I met him, I was walking around, and he's like, hi. And I'm like, hi. I said, I just got accepted to Stanford. I'm interested in possibly coming. And he doesn't ask me, like, where I came from or whatever. He goes, what kind of open problems are you interested in? And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, what kind of things, are just kind of, or what kind of, things are you curious about? And I said, well, I'm really curious about the duality between particles and waves for photons. And he's like, oh, he goes, so am I. He goes, why don't you come in and we'll talk about it? And we had almost 2 hours of conversation about all different kinds of things. And he was just he starts off the thing saying, Boyd Fowler. He goes, I know that name. He goes, there was a famous football player named Boyd Fowler. And he had this incredible memory because he was very interested in gambling. Okay, and from a mathematical point of view, not from
Makes sense.
Physical point of view, but and so he knew like statistics for all different kinds of sports and so we hit it off like right away. All football, he knew almost every sport he knew, and so we started talking, and so the interesting thing was that I liked him so much. I was like, this is a school for me. I've got to go to school here, but the problem was I had not gotten any scholarship, no money. And so I'm like, okay, I can't afford to go. And so at this time, unfortunately, my father is sick already. My father has cancer.
Oh, no.
He has lung cancer. And so my father gets lung cancer when I'm an undergraduate, my last year. And I got a good opportunity to take my father to, to the doctor a lot and be with him. But when I went to grad school, there was just no way my family was going to pay. It was impossible. And so my mom was she was a pretty incredible person. And what she decided to do was she was like, okay, I'm going to call the school. And so she calls the school, she calls the financial aid department, and she talks to this woman. And she says, my son's been admitted. He really wants to go to school here, but he can't afford to go. It's just impossible for us to come. My husband has cancer. He's dying. He'll probably pass, before my son finishes his first year.
Oh my God.
And, what can we do? And the woman said, well, my husband's sick and has cancer too. And she says, let me see what I can do. And this woman, very, very, again, special woman, decides that she's going to try to help find a TA position for me. And
What's her name? So you give her a shout out.
So to be honest with you, I can't remember her name now. It's been so many years, but she was really a special person. I went to visit her several times afterwards and talked to her. I forget now, to be honest. Unfortunately, I can't remember everything. I try.
What's a TA position? Huh?
So it's a teacher's assistant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so I get one of these, and when I get the teacher's assistant position, it pays for my tuition, and it pays me enough money that I can actually afford to live somewhere. So I'm like, okay, this is awesome. And so I make a tough choice because it's not guaranteed that I'm going to get, that it's going to happen over and over again. And as an undergrad, I told you before, I had some, NCAA Division I scholarships, but I decided not to take those because I was afraid I would get injured, and then you don't get any money. And then all of a sudden you can't pay and you're toast. And I thought to myself, okay, getting a TA position or something is not the same as, an athletic scholarship, because it's unlikely that I'm going to study too hard and get a brain injury. So I figured, okay, it's safer. I'm going to try this. So I get the TA position, and I end up working for a professor, Fabian Pease, and he was a good guy. And he was nice to me. And, I worked for him for a couple semesters or a couple quarters, actually 3 quarters. And during that time, it was good. It was a big risk.
What was the program you were admitted to?
So I was admitted to the electrical engineering department.
For master's or for what?
The way it worked back in the day at Stanford is you were admitted as a graduate student. So this is a good question. And then they had this process where they decide who kind of can get a PhD and who can't. Okay.
Interesting.
And so Stanford's idea was actually very brutal, but actually it was great for me. It was really the perfect program for me. They admit, I forget each year how many they admitted to the electrical engineering department. I want to say it was on the order of 300 approximately. Okay. Now I think it's less. And then every year they would have a process called the qualifying examinations. Okay. And the qualifying examinations were designed to be incredibly terrifying. So what would happen is that you would sign up for kind of a set of specialty areas, whatever they would be. And then you would have a set of professors, 10 assigned to you. Okay. And then with the 10 professors, they would decide to ask you different kinds of questions. So you would go there, and I forgot how long it was. It's about 10 minutes for each one, maybe 15 approximately. And you would sit down, and they would ask you some interesting question, okay? And some of these questions were very, very difficult, right? And then when you finished the examination, you got a score from every one of the professors. And then you would be ranked from 1, who was the highest score, to however many people took the exam, which was typically on the order of 150, 200 people took the exam, okay? And the top, 70 kids would pass.
Wow. Brutal.
The rest fail, okay?
Brutal.
You had to pass the qualifying exams if you wanted to get a PhD at Stanford, okay? So it was tough. And some of the questions were very hard. And, I think it depends on your personality and on your style. Some people, I think, failed because there was great pressure. It was great oral pressure, right? You were there sitting in front of someone. You're in front of a Stanford professor who's probably one of the best in the world in his field, and he's asking you hard questions and really grilling you. And for some of the kids, they just couldn't handle it. They're just like, oh my God, this is brutal. I can't do this. And they would fail. For me, it wasn't like that. It was actually quite good. Again, for me, speaking was not a problem. And so I thought, okay, this is a good exam process for me. And I did well on the exam. Okay. And for me, it wasn't super hard. It wasn't that it was easy. We studied hard. We studied a lot for it. Okay. And I do remember some of the questions, actually still to this day, two of them that I remember very well.
What are they?
So let me tell you one. So one of them was a very interesting problem. So I get there, and the professor's sitting behind his desk, and he says, "There's a radio transmitter in my office, and I need you to find it." Okay? And it's hidden. So, and he's in a big office. It's probably 3-4 times the size of this room.
Jeez.
Okay? And it's filled with books and stuff and papers, and it's not the most organized room that you can see. So it's not even if you started just searching through everything, it would be almost impossible to find it. So I decided to myself that, okay, there's no way that by randomly looking around, and he knows this because that's the problem is set up so that you can't randomly find it. And so what I do is I said, all right, well, what's in this room? And he says, you can use anything in the room to find it you want. So I look around. And I search around, and in the bookshelf, there's this old AM radio. And I say to myself, AM radio transmitter, it's got to be an AM radio transmission signal. Otherwise, why would this radio be here? Because it's a very old radio. It's not like, it wouldn't be something he would probably be using. Also, it was only an AM radio, which was kind of a weird thing. So I get the radio, and I turn it on, and I'm like, oh, it works. It has batteries in it.
What's an AM radio?
So, AM and FM radio. Okay, so in the old days, right, people used amplitude modulation. When you transmit a radio signal, there's different ways that you can send information inside of that signal. Okay, and so essentially a radio wave is just, it's a wave, that electromagnetic wave that propagates. And if you modulate the amplitude of that wave, that's what we call amplitude modulation. And if the amplitude modulation of that wave is, let's say, an audio signal like someone's voice, like what we're doing right now, that's AM radio.
Okay.
So FM radio is different than that because then you can modulate, instead of modulating the amplitude, you could actually modulate the frequency. And so like FM radio starts at like 88 megahertz, right, and goes to 108 megahertz approximately. But each bandwidth or each band that they transmit at, they actually have a small bandwidth around there. So maybe it's, let's say 89 megahertz plus or minus, a couple hundred kilohertz. And that difference around there is what they modulate. They change that frequency. And that change in frequency is what actually contains the audio information that you listen to when you listen to radio. So anyway, so there's an AM radio there. I find the AM radio, I turn it on, and I said, okay, I need to see if I can find a signal, right? And so I turned around, and there's radio stations, there's all these things. But I get through, and somewhere I hear this beat, I hear this buzzing noise, bzzz. I'm like, oh, that's got to be it, bzzz. But I don't know for sure, right? I mean, it's something that's not normal, right? There's nobody speaking, there's no music, it's just a buzz, bzzz. I'm like, okay, this has got to be it. So I said, all right, let's see, how, and here's the funny thing, right, is that most AM radios have a mechanism called automatic gain control, which, what does that mean? Okay, it means that the gain of the the amount of sound that you get out of the speaker is constant, independent of how much signal you're getting from the outside world. Okay, but this radio didn't have that. Okay, or it was turned off. And so what it meant is that the closer you got to the signal, the louder it got.
Oh wow! So you had to carry it with you.
So I carried this thing around the room, and I walked around the room, and I found it. And I pulled it out of the thing, you know, and then he asked me a bunch of other questions about AM modulation and just a bunch of radio stuff. And I answered all these things. And, you know, and this professor's name was Ron Bracewell. And Ron Bracewell was an incredible guy also. He actually, so, you know, later on, if we run up to the dish, the dish and all this kind of stuff is kind of Ron Bracewell's thing. Okay?
No way.
So he studied the, essentially how the sun, you know, the corona of the sun, okay, and sunspots and all these things using radio telescopes. And the dish is a radio telescope. Okay? So anyway.
That's pretty interesting.
So it's kind of a cool thing. And so anyway, that was one of the questions. And when I left, I remember I wasn't really sure if I had done well because I'm like, you know, I don't know if there's 10 other questions that I didn't get to or, you know, whatever. And I remember he shook my hand and he said, you know, Boyd, he goes, you're going to do well.
Wow.
And I just, it was one of the times I felt really good. And I was like, okay, this is a good day. And so I left there and I felt good. And he gave me the top score. And so I got a really good score from Ron Bracewell, and I was very happy. And then the other question I remember very well, is that, and this was a very hard question. So I walk in, and the professor says, all right, there's a bowl filled with spaghetti. Okay, it has N different pieces of spaghetti. I said, okay. And he goes, your job is to grab 2 random ends and attach them together. How many loops of spaghetti are you expected to have in the end after you take every single piece of spaghetti and stick one end to the other at random? And I'm like, oh, that's a hard problem. and that was that was one of the hardest problems that I got. And I did very well on it. And not very well, but I did well on it. But the funny thing was that became my advisor. So my advisor, who was, and you know, again, I still talk to this day, his name is Abbas El Gamal. Okay? He's
Egyptian.
He's an Egyptian guy. There you go.
Egyptian guy.
So anyway, and Abbas is a great guy. He was really a great guy. And it was a tough problem. And I was kind of stressed by it at first, but I did okay on it.
What's the answer?
And so I don't remember today. Basically, you use a thing called an indicator function, and you create kind of an expectation around this indicator function. And basically, it's a sum of indicator functions, and you come up with some number. And I forget what it was, but the exact number wasn't important. The technique was the important thing.
Yeah.
And I did good on the technique, and so he was good. And after that,
Is he still there? Or he's retired?
Well, he is emeritus, I believe now. You know, he was the department chair for many years, and so, you know, and Abbas and I keep in good contact. He's a very good guy. He's been asking me recently to write a book with him. I haven't gotten to that yet, but he's a good guy, and he ended up becoming my advisor, and it was a good relationship. He was a very good guy, and I really learned a huge amount from him, and so I'm really grateful that I got my opportunity to go to school there, and I got a chance to meet some incredible people and all that. And to be honest with you, that was something that really changed my life, to be honest.
How?
Well, you know, I got an opportunity to meet people I would have never met otherwise. And, you know, you may not think between different universities there's a big difference. But I think everything, okay, in life, it's not just universities, it's the you know, company you work at, it's the people you meet, the people you hang out with. The quality of the people you're with makes a big difference to the influence you have in your whole life, okay? And it's just, and people are kind of distributed kind of exponentially in terms of their abilities. It may not seem like that, and I never thought that either. When I was a kid, I didn't really ever think about this, right? I kind of thought everyone's kind of the same, but, you know, they just somehow think differently than I do or whatever. But after observing the world, there is kind of an exponential difference. And you may see this in terms of, let's say, wrestling, okay? You know, there are millions of wrestlers in the world, but there's, you know, every year there are, you know, or every 4 years, there are 6 Olympic champions, okay? And so if you look at the millions of people, there's only 6 guys who are Olympic champions, okay? Almost everything in the world is distributed the same way, okay? smart guys, super athletic guys, super musical guys. It doesn't matter. The distribution is very exponential, meaning that the people who are the most incredible, there's a very tiny number of them. Okay? Most of us are kind of more average. When you have an opportunity to be with some of those people who are really at the very top end, you can learn incredible things from them, as well as you just, at least for me, I just got a chance to absorb a lot of things that I probably wouldn't have gotten to learn or absorb in other situations. And I think for me, to be honest, Nor, I was lucky. It's not that I deserved that. I did work hard when I was an undergraduate, but I ended up, I got accepted. I somehow figured out how to get money to go there. I got the money. I went to school. I worked hard. I had a great time. And I got a chance to meet the most incredible people, right? That, I got to meet people who are, Nobel Prize winners. I got to,
Who?
people like William Shockley.
Wow.
Okay. And, and actually many others. And it was just almost every class you take it with someone who's an absolute expert. They're the top 0.001% in the world of people in that area. And so you just get insights from things that are just incredible. And anyway, so I was lucky. It was a good deal for me. I'm really happy that I made that choice. I'm happy that I did that versus going to, and nothing is wrong with UC San Diego at all. Okay, it's a great school also. Just for me, this was the right fit. And so that's what school looks like for me. And then when I finished my PhD, I stayed actually as a postdoc because I enjoyed working at Stanford so much. And I really enjoyed working with my advisor, Abbas El-Gamal. And at that point, he gave me a great opportunity to learn how to kind of sell things. So, as a postdoc, I helped, mentor a lot of students, okay, which was great. But at the same time, I was the one who ran out and got money from companies. And so I went to companies like Intel and Kodak and Canon and a bunch of others and convinced them to donate large sums, millions of dollars, to Stanford for a program called the Digital Camera Program. And so one of the things that, before, like nowadays, everything here is a digital camera. But when I was a graduate student, there was no such thing as a digital camera. They were film cameras.
Hand crank or what?
No, they weren't hand cranked. They had mechanical things in them more. Okay, I didn't grow up when there were dinosaurs rolling around here.
Sorry.
Okay, but they didn't have digital cameras. Okay, and they were just starting to come into development. And so companies like Kodak and HP and others were starting to work on this. And so they were looking to develop students and new technologies. So it was easy to run around and convince companies to donate money. Okay, and so I got this opportunity to travel, and I would go to, Intel in Chandler, Arizona, and talk to their VPs to get money. I would go to Canon here in the Bay Area and talk to people, get them to convince us, to do this. I'd go back east to Rochester and meet people at Kodak and convince them, hey, you should give money. And it was a great experience for me because I got an opportunity as a student to feel what is it like to, be an executive in a company where you're selling your product or your technology or whatever to different organizations and big companies. So I got a chance to meet with VPs and with different people and explain in engineers who were much more senior than me about what we were doing and why it was important and why it would be valuable to their company. And I got to see, what did they value, what didn't they value, I also got to learn that, I was relatively good at speaking in front of big groups, and, I wasn't nervous talking to, the VPs of different organizations and things like that. And so it was a great opportunity for me. And so while I was a postdoc, I got quite a bit of opportunity to meet companies and kind of think about, how I fit into all of this and, what am I going to do? Am I going to start my own company? Am I going to work for another company? What am I going to do? So I finished my postdoc, and this is like 98. And so anyway, there's some other things going on in my life I probably should explain, but I haven't. I've just been talking about school. So, I get married when I'm a graduate student, okay? I don't know if that was the best choice or the worst. It was okay. And
Why do you say that?
Well, Well, because many of the guys I know got married after graduate school, okay? Because there's a lot of work, there's a lot of stuff going on. I kind of decided that I would do that. I don't know. I mean, it wasn't like I was pushed to do it. I was forced. I kind of decided that,
It's the right thing to do.
that it was the right thing to do. I had had a girlfriend from when I was an undergrad, and we had got along pretty good. She was a good fit for me. This is one of those things. My wife is a very complicated, difficult woman. She's a very strong-willed Italian woman.
Oh.
And she's not an easy person, but she's kind of a good fit for me because I'm not that easy, to be honest. I explained that my intrinsic personality, I'm a very difficult person. I'm one of those guys who, the first guy to say, yeah, you're a dickhead and be difficult with you and, disagree with you. And I kind of, and I've learned over the years to try to manage that style so that I don't come off that way, maybe.
I'm guilty too.
But it's very strong inside of me. And so my wife is good because she doesn't put up with a lot of shit for me, which is good. It's important. And also, I'm not, some guys are really good at like care and feeding of their wives, okay? And some wives really need that. They need a lot. I knew that I was going to work a lot, and I know that I just do a lot of things. I work a lot, okay? I work out a lot. I'm out of the house a lot of the time. I'm not a homebody. I don't sit around and putter around the house. That's just not my style. If I had a woman that was very needy, it would have been impossible for me, right? She would have gone crazy. Like, when I travel to Asia and I'm gone for a month and I'm working, like 80 hours a week and, and then when I get home, I go running or I go to the gym or most women would have been like, okay, this is not going to work out. Yeah. This is bad. My wife's a very self-sufficient woman. She doesn't need a lot of coddling and other bullshit like that. She's pretty tough, okay? But it also, because she has that personality, she's a difficult woman, okay? So because she's very self-sufficient and she's very, confident of herself, she can be very difficult, right? So you have to, everything in life is a trade-off, right? And so I kind of made this decision that, she's probably a good fit for me because I know what my life is going to look like. At least I think I do. And I know the personality style I have. If I marry a woman who's a real sweetheart and she's super nice, I'm going to crush her soul. And it'll be horrible. And so I need someone who's tough. I need someone who can put up with my style and can be self-sufficient. So when I'm not around, can help take care of the kids, can do all these things. And she won't be flipped out that she's doing that. And my wife's been good at that. Until she got sick, she was good at that. So I just decided, she's probably the right fit for me. Yeah, can I wait, another 5 years, maybe find a different woman? Yeah, but in life, I just said this was probably the right fit. And so I decided I got married. So anyway, I got married. And I had my first child in 1998, okay? That was when my first son was born. And so I'm still a postdoc then, okay? And now my wife's like, I think you need a real job.
Wow.
And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. This doesn't pay a lot. And, I need to figure out what I'm going to do. And so at that point, I decided, okay, I'm going to try to figure out what to do. And this is the beginning of digital cameras. This is just like the very beginning. And all the work that I've been doing was on image sensors that would end up going into that Canon device, that Sony device. Those are image sensors that are the technology that I worked on developing when I was at Stanford and afterwards. And so all of that stuff, we said, well, there must be a business for it. So I decided that I would start a company, okay? And I ran around and there was a company that I had worked for before and a guy who had run that company. And I went to go talk to him about, helping find investors. And so he said, yeah, Boyd, let me see if I can do that. And so he helped find some investors and we started a company. And that company was called Pixel Devices. And, it was an interesting experience for me because I thought it's like everything, Nora. In many times in life, you think you know more than you know until you actually get there. And then you say, I think I know less than I was hoping I would know. And when I first got to the company, I thought, well, I make these new image sensor things. These CMOS image sensors are going to be big someday. At least I believe that. And so I'm just going to make them, and then people are going to show up and buy them, right? That's how it works. And it was a little naive. Actually, not a little. It was incredibly naive, okay? And, I was kind of, to be honest, clueless, really, about the complexity of how difficult it is to sell and what really makes people buy products. New technology is not what people want. And, even kind of something that's slightly better than what they have is not the most important thing to them. Most people want to do simple things where they're not going to get in trouble, the product's going to be good enough, and they're going to, get benefits from their boss and their company and blah, blah, from the decisions they make. And buying products from a small company is usually not the way you do that, okay? Unless there's a big problem, okay? Unless you have a problem that you can't solve and that other big companies that are in the business already, like Sony, that was, one of our key competitors when we were first starting out. If they can't solve it, then maybe you can help a company solve it. And so it was a struggle. It was really, really a struggle. So when I left Stanford and we started Pixel Devices, getting money and going through VCs and venture capitalists and learning how that whole process worked, Nora, was tough, okay? And, these people are rough, right? You show up and they're just like, yeah, you guys are idiots. Get the hell out of here. Don't let the door hit you in the ass. Go.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, they're rude and brutal. Okay, because listen, we don't have time for this. This is just ridiculous. You just come in. I remember one VC, and I won't mention the name. And we show up there, and we give our pitch. And 10 minutes in, the guy looks at me. He goes, listen, I'm done. And I said, okay, but we're not finished. He goes, listen, someone was here just a few minutes before talking about the internet, and he's talking about a business that's going to be, $50 billion, okay? And they only need 1% of it to be a huge company. And you're talking about this semiconductor business that's never going to be that big. And this is just ridiculous. You're wasting my time. Get out of here now. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. That's a good day. And so,
wow.
And I had to, I also had to remind myself to bite my tongue, because my first instinct was like, and to open my mouth and say the wrong thing. But I was lucky. I was there with an older guy who was probably closer to my age now than my age then. And he was just like, Boyd, listen, they're going to be like this. It's just how it is. You just need to understand that you're asking them to give you something, right? To give you money, to give you trust. They don't know who you are. They don't know, they're just trying to evaluate from a very top level if they want to do this or not, and does it fit their model of what they invest in. And so don't get mad, don't get upset, just know this is going to be what it's going to be like. It's going to be a rough ride. You're going to have these guys who are not really fun, and they're going to be rude and difficult, but in the end, if we get through this, we'll find somebody who decides they want to invest. And that's kind of what happened. We ended up, finding a couple businesses that ended up, Citibank was our main investor back in the day, and we were really lucky that we got that connection. And so the company gets funded, and we build products, and we start selling them all over the world. But the reason people buy our products is not because of what I think. I mean, I think, okay, they're going to be better, right? They're lower noise, they're faster, there's some great thing in there that they're going to buy. People bought it a lot of times because we would be willing to custom make it for them, so it was better fit for their product than for us. And there was a great example of a company that we built for called, I won't mention their name, but they were in Minnesota, okay? And this company made robots for making printed circuit boards. And printed circuit boards are the things that go into all these electronics things that you put all the chips on, right? You solder them onto these little boards, and they are the things that take all the electrical signals and move them everywhere. But when you build these boards, they have to be inspected. And so there are companies that build equipment that inspects those. And when you inspect them, you use things like cameras, right? Because you use optical inspection, and then you use software to determine, is this been built correctly? Is it defect free? Is it, is it good enough for this device? And so we work with this company, and they're very interested in working with us. But we've been struggling, right? Most companies just kind of, say, hey, listen, don't let the door hit you in the ass. Get out of here. And we find out that these guys are really interested. And I thought, oh, wow, they really appreciate my technology. They think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then I learned later on the only thing they actually care about is because the sensor has to go in this mechanical arm that that moves all over this big robotic surface that actually inspects this thing. And they need it to be this very small size, and no one makes a package this small. And our little company decided we would be willing to make you a package that's small enough that the product would fit into this little arm.
Wow.
And that's why they bought it. They didn't buy it because they liked the design of the product we had. It was just the package itself that they cared about. And
wow.
And we didn't even design the package. Actually, someone else designed the package. We just put the product into it. We were just willing to make it small enough and use kind of a newer packaging technology than our competitors. And so, Noah, I learned a lot when I worked there. And, I wish I could say, I got rich doing it. I didn't do it. Okay. Most startup companies in the Valley don't do terribly well. And this company barely returned the money from the investors that they invested in it. And when the 2003 downturn happened, so this company got started in 1998. All right. And if you remember right, maybe you don't, you're quite young for this probably. But in 1998 through about 2000, there was a huge bubble, okay, in the tech sector. Okay. And this is when the internet's first starting to happen. This is when Amazon goes public. This is when, I should have put all my money in Amazon back then. Anyway, you should have, would have, could have, right? But this was a big growth time. Everyone thought that, the stock market's going to go to infinity and all this kind of stuff. But by the time 2001 pops up, people start to realize that, the internet's not making that much money. It's going to be a long time before it becomes what it is today. And a lot of other things like telecom and other things aren't growing at the rate that people expected them to or that they were promised to. So the market implodes, and there's a huge bubble that pops in 2001, and the market drops, people lose jobs. I mean, here in the Valley, it'll be hard to, for many people, especially the younger ones who are listening to this, to imagine. But there was a time when, in 2001, you go on the freeway and it was packed, and it was crazy busy. But then all of a sudden, a few months later, all these companies go bust, right? They basically, they get rid of half their employees or all their employees. And within a 6-month period, it goes from, traffic being a catastrophe on the 101 to you can drive around on the 101, no big deal. It's like, oh, this is awesome.
Wow.
And there's this huge outflux of people from the Bay Area because the jobs basically have gone. And of course, for Pixel Devices, we're not a company that's making tons of money. We're losing money, but we still have money in the bank. And so we're doing everything we can to try to survive during those times, but it was rough. And between 2001 and 2003, many, many companies in the Valley went bankrupt. Many people lost their jobs, went away. Investment companies weren't investing. They're like, we're saving our money. We're not putting it in anything right now. And it was a really, really rough time, Noor. I would say that was one of the really tough times here in the Valley, maybe even tougher than in 2008 when it dropped then, because it was a different sector. This was really the tech sector that fell apart, and the tech sector is the Silicon Valley. Okay, so anyway, so 2003 comes along. We need more money. We're not really cash flow positive. We are making money, but we're not making enough to really sustain the business as a whole. And so we have a couple choices. We either want to get a little more money, and I try to convince our investors to do it, and they're just like, I'm sorry, guys, the market sucks. No one wants to invest right now. You're just out of luck. We're going to find a buyer for you. Okay, and I'm pretty grumpy about this. Pretty grumpy is really an understatement. I'm pissed off. Okay. And so, anyway, they just like, sorry, we could get a couple choices. We're going to sell it. We're going to shut it down. We're going to do something to it, but we don't want to deal with this anymore, and we're not going to put any more money in it.
Citibank.
Yeah, Citibank. And so, it's pretty tough. It's a pretty tough thing. I won't mention any names, okay? And there were some really, really good guys at Citibank. Our first set of guys that we worked with were great guys, but they ended up leaving when the downturn happened, and the guys we got left with weren't as much fun.
Why did they invest in you in the first place?
Well, because the first guys were excited about the semiconductor business, and they also, knew some people I knew that, believed that we were going to be able to make them some money, and believed that the digital camera market, which it has become huge, right? So you have to remember that when we started all of this, there were no cell phone cameras, there were no digital cameras, there were camcorders, and there were digital devices in there. But it was a very small market. And not that many people could envision that cell phones were going to be huge. Actually, I got a great story about that. I'm going to tell that one in a second too. So, but anyway, they had the vision that digital cameras were going to be big, and that since PDI was part of that revolution, they thought this was a good investment. But the next set of investors, they were just like, listen, man. Here's the other thing too. When you look at investors, there are different kinds of investors, and some of them are more interested in one business or another. Like, let's say the guys at Citibank, used to be doctors. They would probably be very excited about healthcare and biomed and other things like that. Okay. We were lucky that our investors had some engineering background, so they were excited about different kinds of engineering things. When they left, though, the people that took over were mostly finance guys. So they were interested not only just in the money, but they were interested in financial technology. Like if we were writing software for banks, they would have been great. They would have been, because they could understand that, right? I mean, this is another thing. It's like the thing that Warren Buffett always says is that invest in things you understand, okay? And so if your investors are engineers, then engineering seems like an obvious thing to invest in. If you're a banker, then invest in things that look like banks or look like banking instruments or of some flavor, right? Software or, different kinds of things like, Visa cards or things that make sense to you, right? Because you deal with them every day. And so when the investors got switched, then they were like, you guys are not really some kind of financial tech, fintech or whatever. You are essentially something that's outside our interests. So we're gonna figure out how to get rid of you. So they decided to try to sell us, and in the end, we get purchased by Agilent. And Agilent is just a very recent spinoff from Hewlett-Packard.
No way.
Yeah. And Hewlett-Packard's a great company. Again, I don't know what it's like today. I haven't worked at, these companies in a long time. But when I got to Agilent, the people who were longtime HP people were incredible people, brilliant, good guys, nice guys. It was a great company to work for. But I was very unhappy, to be honest, right? Because I was mad at our investors that they were going to sell us. And I even threatened multiple times not to go. And in the end, the investors did some pretty mean stuff and kind of forced me to go financially. And so, and I won't explain all those details because it's probably not really... I was pretty grumpy about it. But anyway, in the end, I was kind of financially forced to go and do it. So I was pretty mad when I went to Agilent. And it was a very tough time for me. Very, very tough time, to be honest with you. And so I struggled quite a bit when I first went there, but it was a great company. Many good people. I met lots of good people. I worked with many of them over the years. And I think it was a good time for me to be there. It was a great experience. I just struggled. I mean, it was hard when you go from having kind of your own company, even when it is kind of your own company, it never is, right? You have to cater to the customers. You have to do. It's always someone else's company when you're doing it really. But I was young, and it was a difficult transition for me. I went from working 80 hours a week to 45 or something like that. And that was also a very big stretch for me. It was very hard. I was kind of like, what am I doing? How come I'm not here late at night? All these things. And it was a rough transition. It was very, very rough. But I did enjoy it after a while. But it required one of my very good friends. So one of the people who worked with me, who was also a PhD student with me at Stanford, and his name is Dana. And one day, I'm moping around, I'm all grumpy, and I'm saying mean things to people, and I'm just not being a good guy. Dana pulls me in a room, and he's like, Boyd, he goes, you're being a total. He goes, listen to me. He goes, so you get paid more than you used to get paid. You work half as much time as you need to, okay? And everything is better right now. He goes, it's more stable. It's like there's no chance that this is going to go under in the next few weeks, and he goes, what are you upset about? He goes, it's like, listen, you can't be mad that everything is better in your life, all right? Be freaking reasonable and think about this. And he goes, don't be an asshole. And I'm like, all right. And so And I really respect Dana. He's a good guy. We've worked together many times. We always got along. And he is a very, very blunt person. And I need that sometimes. And he just gave it to me. And I went home and I just sat around and I said, okay, what am I doing? Why am I upset that I can spend more time with my family, my children? I get paid more and I work less. I can work out more. I can do other things. Why am I upset? And it took me time to just kind of realize that I wasn't upset for a good reason. I was just upset because I didn't get my way, right? I wanted to be running this business. I wanted to be in charge. I didn't want to give up these things. And it took that pressure from someone that I knew and respected to say something difficult to me that I didn't want to hear, to finally realize, okay, take advantage of this. Do some things that you would have never done before. Go and, spend some more time with your kids. And I did. And, just to give you a great example of this, is that I worked 5-minute drive, like almost walking distance, from where my son went to school when he was in elementary school.
Cool.
Okay. And my wife said, they're looking for parents to help with the lunch program, to help, do this thing for lunch. And, of course, my first thought is, I don't go take care of kids for lunch. My wife was like, you've been stressed about these things. And because I talked to her about what Dana had told me. And she said, maybe you should
This could help.
Yeah, why don't you go and try? And so I go, and my son goes to a local school, and so I go there and I help with the lunch program, and my son's thrilled to see me. He's like, Dad's here, he's smiling and running around and having a great time, and I get a chance to meet some of the other parents who are very nice, and I meet all his teachers and get a chance to talk with them on a regular basis and all these things, and it's not that I go every day. I mean, I think I did it like once a week for a quarter. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's not a lot of time, but I think it was Fridays, at lunch or something. But I got a lot out of it. I got a lot of connection to my son, who I hadn't been as connected to in the past, and I got a chance to meet his teachers and many of the parents, and just be more connected to things. And it was a big learning experience for me that sometimes you need to have perspective on things in life, mm-hmm. right? And sometimes you get stuck in a certain mindset of what you want or what you think you want.
You don't count your blessings.
That's right. And you it's much easier in life for you to say that my glass is half empty. Oh no, my water glass is half empty. What am I going to do with this? And then when someone comes around to you and it kind of slaps you upside the head and says, you idiot, it's half full.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Just drink the water you have and enjoy it. And remember, you still have water. I don't even have any more water. Mm-hmm. Enjoy your water. Mm-hmm. That's something that is hard. And I think sometimes, especially when you're a very focused person like me, I get very focused on something. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to make this happen. It's very important to have people in your life that you respect that can actually every once in a while point out to you, maybe there's a better choice here for you. Maybe mm-hmm. there's a better way to do this. Mm-hmm. Maybe you need a different perspective on this. And I tell a story all the time that, that I think is important to my employees and people that I learned. And this situation is kind of where it really was poignant to me. And there's an old story about the 3 blind men and the elephant. And you probably know this story, mm-hmm. right? And so the blind men stand around the elephant, and the one at the tail grabs a hold of it and says, this is a broom. And the blind man in the center says, you're crazy. He's holding on to the leg. He says, this is a tree trunk. Okay. And then the guy at the front grabs a trunk and he says, no, it's a snake. And I think all of us are a bit like blind men, and surrounding yourself with people that can sometimes tell you you're being an idiot, or, this is not the right perspective. Maybe there's a different way to look at all of this, is important for all of us. And I think that's something that I really took from that situation at Agilent. And I tried to remind myself that people are, the feedback you get from others is very important for your own personal mindset. And, that's why, again, surrounding yourself with good people is very important. The quality of the people that you surround yourself with makes a great difference to your own ability, because they can see things in you. And a true friend will tell you some of these things, especially when you're being stupid. They'll be like, hey, This is not something you shouldn't do this, or you're not being very grateful for what you have, or you're not doing. And those are very important things, and those are very important people to have around. So,
what's the cell phone story?
oh yeah, so this is a great one. So years ago, I had a friend, and unfortunately he's passed now, and a really good guy. His name is Peter Denyer. And so Peter was a professor at the University of Edinburgh in the UK. And the way I got to know him was through one of the professors at Stanford named Michael Godfrey. And Michael knew Peter quite well. And for a while, my sister lived in the UK, right? And so I would go and visit her there. She ended up getting married, and anyway. And when she got married, I remember going to visit, and so I go and, Michael introduces me to this guy named Peter Denyer. And Peter's a good guy. He shows me around the university. He's super nice. And he's working in the same field, exactly the same area I am. He's working in, digital cameras, solid state devices. So we hit it off right away. And he's a super nice guy, just a really friendly, outgoing kind of person. And, he takes me out to dinner, kind of on the main street in Edinburgh, and we have a couple beers, and he tells me all these stories, and so anyway, so we meet several times. But the last time that I met him, unfortunately, before he died, I was there, and I think I was there to visit my sister again. Maybe I was traveling in Europe for whatever reason, and I went to the UK to see her. And since I was there, I said, well, I should go see Peter. He invited me to come up anytime I'm in the area and see what's going on. So I get on the train. I get on a sleeper train, and I go from King's Cross in London, and I go to Edinburgh, and I get off the train. And when I get there, Peter's there, and he comes, gets me, and takes me over to the hotel. I dump off my stuff, and then I spend the day over at his company. Okay, and his company used to be called VLSI Vision. I believe, VLSI Vision, I believe was what it was called, and then it got purchased by ST Micro. Okay, and so his company had just been purchased, a little before my company got purchased, and he was not that excited about it, but he's like, all right, boy, and I want you to meet all these people. And I got a chance to meet some really great people while I was there, and, because he had just got his company started a little before that, and so I spent all this time at the company talking to people and meeting people, and some people I still even work with and see to this day. And that night, when we finished, Peter's like, hey, I'd like to take you to dinner. And I'm like, yeah, okay, sure. I'm just here really for the day, and tomorrow I'm going to go back to London, and then I'm going to fly out, and blah, blah. He's like, okay, that's great. He goes, I got something. I want to talk to you. And I'm okay. And so we go to dinner, and we're sitting at dinner, and, we're, eating a meat pie or some kind of typical Scottish food, and having a Scottish beer, and it was good. It was fun. The food's never great in Scotland. It's kind of okay. But there's some things that are good. I enjoyed the meat pies, to be honest. And so I was enjoying the meat pie, and we're talking, and I'm young then, right? So we're drinking a little more beer than I would normally drink today. Today, I'm kind of a one beer kind of guy. But then we were probably 3 or 4 beers in, okay? And these are big pints of beer. And Peter's like, I got to tell you something. He goes, I wasn't sure I was going to tell you, but I got to tell you. I said, okay. I'm like, tell me. He goes, we're going to make the first image sensors that go into cell phones.
Wow.
And I'm like, first of all, Peter, that's not the first, because, they make them in Japan where they put CCDs in there, right? So he's like, yeah, but these are the first CMOS image sensors. Yeah, I know about the ones in Japan, but these are going to be bigger. They're going to be super high volume, and I just look at him and I'm like, Peter, I said, okay, what's the resolution? And he says, well, I think he's like, they're 320 by 240. I'm like, that's SIF format. That's going to be crap. Those are going to be terrible images. It's going to be these terrible lenses. This is going to be the worst product. No one's going to ever use those things. He goes, I said, this is dumb as can be, Peter. No one's ever going to want to have a cell phone camera. This is a dumb idea.
What year is this?
This is 2001, I think. Mm-hmm. Okay. So this is a long time ago.
Boy, you're wrong.
Yeah. And so Peter looks at me and he's like, boy, you just don't understand. You don't get it. And I'm like, you're right. I don't get it. This is dumb as a log. I said, Peter, this is not going to work out. And unfortunately, before Peter could tell me, I told you so, he died of cancer.
Oh, no.
And he was quite young. I would say he was in his early 40s when he died.
Wow.
And so Peter's a great guy. But the reason I tell the story is because this is another thing. Even for people who are an expert in a given area, sometimes it's not obvious what's going to be successful in life.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing is true about products. It's about people. One thing I also learned, right? It come back to my Stanford story, right? So you have a professor who looks at me, and the first thing he says, "You're never going to make it here. It's not going to work out." And then I end up being a pretty good student, and I do pretty well, and it all works out good. Sometimes in life, it's not easy to look at a book and decide, what's inside of it, right? You have to take time. You have to understand the people, the product, the whatever it is, because sometimes it's just not obvious. And I thought, I'm a smart guy. I can figure out, who would need a cell phone camera? This is the dumb idea. It's going to be horrible. And now it's probably one of the most important features. If you look at a camera, most people...
Every time they sell a phone, that's how they advertise it.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. It's really, really important. And, the resolution or the image quality or one of these things, even when I talk to my wife who, doesn't think that much about phones, if I get her a new phone, she says, "What's the resolution?"
Yep. It's the biggest sales pitch.
Yeah, it is. And so
it's the biggest, every time they advertise a new phone, it's the first thing they show is, the image quality and the picture.
That's right.
That's how the advertisement is actually centered.
That's exactly right, Nora. And so that's a really big deal. And that's something that, I couldn't see at the time. And so what I took from that and what was really important about that for me was that don't take things for granted. Don't assume that you know the right answer. Because, I grew up as a kid, and a lot of times I was always the smartest kid, right? And so I kind of figured out, I can figure this out. I figured out before you guys. I mean, and to give you an example of that, I remember years ago when I was in middle school, there was a math team at school, right? And I wasn't really interested. I was good at math, but I told you back then I was very difficult. Right? Mm-hmm. And one of my friends said, "Hey, listen, we need 4 people to compete, okay? And we only have 3. And we really could use if you would go." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not going." and then all of a sudden, somehow, they convinced me because one of the guys I knew pretty well, and he's like, "Come on, boy, just go. It'll be fun." And I'm like, "All right, I'm going." Okay, so we go, and yeah, of course, I get one of the top scores, wow. and I didn't even study. I didn't even practice for it, right? And so I just feel like, I'm one of the smartest kids, blah, blah, blah. And so it just some things came natural to me. But I learned a very good lesson with this whole cell phone thing. And I learned it many other times too. At Stanford, I learned it many times. But this was just a reminder that, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. And I have to tell myself that, okay? I'm not. And I need to know that I need to learn from others, and I need to listen more sometimes and talk less. And it's one of my greatest weaknesses. Over my life, I've been one of those guys who, I talk first, and even when you're talking to me, I'm thinking...
How to respond to me.
No, I'm thinking, you need to stop talking so I can tell you the right answer.
Wow.
Okay? And it took me a long time to build into okay, I need to listen more and talk less so that, and I'm still not good at it. I'm just being honest. It's not my great skill. I was never given that skill. So I have to work hard when I'm at work and when I'm in other situations to try to say less and listen more and try to be humble and try to say, okay, I have something that I can learn from everybody. And it took me a long time, Nora, to build those things. But this case with Peter definitely humbled me quite a bit. And it's something I'm embarrassed about to this day. Because I remember coming home and telling my wife all about this too and saying...
And how ridiculous it was. Huh?
Yeah, and my wife's like, "Yeah, it sounds pretty strange. I don't know why anyone would want one." And then years later, it's obvious that was just the wrong choice and didn't make sense. So anyway, that's my story about cell phones. And so I use that all the time. So when marketing guys come to me and say that, this new widget they've come up with is going to be the greatest thing, and I say, "Oh, this guy's an idiot." I have to remind myself. I step back and I say, "Okay, maybe he's a genius, and I am not figuring this out. So let me spend some time and try to think more about this before I decide that it doesn't make any sense."
Let's do a rapid fire. Okay.
Okay. I don't know what a rapid fire is, but okay. That's my phone.
Oh, you have it with you?
No, it's in the other room.
Okay.
We'll go get it in a minute.
So let's You want me to go get it? So rapid fire is basically quick answers.
Sure.
So I'm going to ask a bunch of questions and
Okay.
you can give stories. That's fine, like a minute
Sure.
or two.
Okay.
So I want to ask about your time at Stanford.
Okay, sure.
What was your favorite places to study or to hang out?
Okay, so my favorite places to hang out. I had my own office. Okay,
Where?
That was in the Durand building,
Mm-hmm.
and so I normally would study in the Durand building. That was my biggest hangout place. But one thing that stands out just as a fun thing when I were there is that on Friday nights there was an office that had a VCR machine in it. Okay, and we would break in every Friday night. Okay, the professors knew we did it, so it's not really breaking in, but we would pick the lock and we would get in there and we would go to Tower Records and we would buy some strange video. Okay, a Lynch movie or something like this, and we would come back and we would watch that as a group, and we'd sit there and we'd drink a beer and hang out, and those were some really fun times that I remember. So I used to hang out a lot in the Durand building because that's where my office was.
How about restaurants?
Restaurants. Oh my gosh, I couldn't afford restaurants very much. So
So you'd eat on campus?
you eat on campus
Where?
most of the time. Just typically we go to Treseder.
Mm-hmm.
So Treseder had an eating area there.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's much nicer, and they have like much of little restaurant kind of like things inside of it.
Mm-hmm.
But we used to go to a place called Nuts and Mud,
Mm-hmm.
and that was another place that was, and actually that was not in Treseder. That was in where was that? That was in one of the other buildings. I can't really remember now. Where was it? Maybe it was in the Terman building, actually.
Okay.
And so, but anyway, most of the places I would eat were on campus back in the day. If I was going to go out to eat, usually we would end up going to San Francisco. And then in San Francisco, we would just find whatever had a long line and didn't look like it was too expensive. And we would go there. And so, I mean, because again, for a long time, I grew up without a lot of money. My family didn't have any. And, when I was a Stanford student, even though I did get some money as a part of the stipend, as part of going to school there, it wasn't much. And so I was always not well fed, let's put it that way. And so I couldn't afford those things.
What was the hardest thing that you had at Stanford?
The hardest thing.
Like in terms of subjects, experiences?
What was the hardest thing? I think for me, the hardest thing was writing my PhD thesis. So, Nora, I'm good at a lot of things, but I was never really gifted with great writing. Okay, I grew up in a family with great writers. My mother was a great writer. My older son got that skill. He's a great writer. I'm not a great writer. I'm a competent writer, okay? And I can write things that people can read and understand. That's not a problem. But it was hard for me to write, 200 pages of material. And it was a very hard time for me. When I was doing my PhD, I locked myself in a room, essentially 8 to 10 hours a day for 4 months to finish writing.
Wow, that's a long time.
And it was a lot of work for me. And when I was 3/4 finished, I was kind of getting burned out, and I was like, oh man, I'm never going to finish this. So I decided that I would take a 2-week vacation and go to Yellowstone, okay, and go hiking. And that was a big win. It kind of cleared my mind, made me feel good. I came back, did about another month or so of writing, creating figures, other things, finished it up, and then submitted my PhD thesis. So for me, that was probably the hardest thing. It was a lot of documentation, a lot of writing, a lot of organizing. The organizing wasn't hard. It was really just taking all the words and getting them onto the page. It just took a lot of effort.
Okay.
So anyway, that was hard for me.
What is your favorite sport now?
My favorite sport is wrestling.
Why?
And so why do I love wrestling? I love wrestling because there are many, many sports, and I've played so many different sports over the years, but I think wrestling requires a different level of both mental and physical challenge than any other sport. And so, let me just give you an example. If you look at baseball, and I played baseball when I was a kid, okay, there's a team of guys, right? And, when you have a bad day, you could say, well, Johnny wasn't hitting well today, and Tommy wasn't catching the ball, and, and Frankie wasn't running well. And you could say, but I did great. And that's, I think that's kind of a different kind of mindset. Also, a lot of sports have this whole idea of, if you're not good enough, we cut you. Okay? You suck, you can't throw the ball well, you're out of here. Two things I love about wrestling. One is that I love that it's just you and the other guy. Okay? If you lose, it's you. It's not anybody else. The other thing I love about wrestling is that it is something where you don't get cut. If you're willing to come in every day, you're willing to work, you're willing to give it your all, the team keeps you. And there's something really beautiful about that because it's this inclusive type of environment that I really like. And I think wrestling is a very, very important sport, especially for boys. I mean, I think it's great for girls too, but especially for boys, and especially for ones who were like me, who were difficult and fought and did other things. It's a great way to have it's a great way to have, do the right thing. For me, I'm, as I get older, I look for things that, that I can do in the mountains. Because normally when I go on vacation, just so you know, I'm not a beach guy, right? Some guys, they go to the beach and they hang out, they drink pina coladas or whatever, but I'm not that. I mean, if
You're
I go
type A. You like to struggle and have pain and
yes, that is exactly
be cold.
That's exactly right. You know exactly the thing. And so, for me, that's not my thing, and I just don't do it. And so I've never actually that's not true. I have had a beach vacation, okay, but it's very rare. And normally for me, I go to the mountains, and my vacation is I'm hiking, 10 hours a day, and it's just. You have to have a certain style. You have to know what your personality is. And over time, I've lived here now for a very long time, ever since I came up here to go to school. And during that time, Nor, I've enjoyed living in the Bay Area, but I want to live in the mountains. I want to be somewhere where there's snow on the ground in the winter. And I want to be 5 minutes away from skiing and from, doing these kind of things. And so Park City is a good balance. I did think about, since my family lives in Colorado, I thought, okay, maybe I'll move to
next
Steamboat.
state over.
Yeah, and I thought maybe I'll move to Steamboat. Maybe I'll move to Vail. Maybe I'll move to things. I mean, there's a couple of things. First of all, they're more expensive.
In Utah?
No, more expensive in Colorado. Okay?
Actually?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
More expensive than California?
More expensive than Utah.
Okay.
Okay. And so that was part of it. But another thing was it was just the distance, right? So in Park City, I'm about 6 hours from my sisters. And so if I moved to Steamboat, I'd be like 4 hours. So it's a little shorter, but not that much. And if you think about the commute, and how difficult it is to get to airports and other things, even if I want to work part-time, mm-hmm. it's rough. So I just said, I think this is the place. So anyway, Nor, that's kind of my plan long term.
I know you're hoping to retire in the mountains.
Yeah. So, but I don't have a great, I mean, here's the thing. I've done a lot of things already, Nor. My goal when I retire is to spend more time mentoring people, okay? Mm-hmm. My plan is to continue coaching wrestling,
In Utah as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll find the local high school there, and I'll teach those kids how to wrestle.
Nice.
Okay? And, I want to find other ways to give back. That's kind of my goal. And so, but wrestling is my number one thing to do. I'm sure I'll find others. I thought about many things. Maybe I'll think about being, an adjunct professor somewhere. I've thought about that.
That's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, I've thought about that, and I have some connections at University of Utah.
Wow.
So maybe I'll do something there. It's those things are kind of up in the air. I mean, I
think you'd make a great professor, honestly.
So
and a great coach as well.
I'm good at talking in front of others. Mm-hmm. I've learned that over the years, and so I would like to do some more mentorship. That's probably. I feel like, for me over the years, I do feel like I've had some good opportunities. I've had some tough times, and I've had some, bad things happen, and I grew up in kind of a tougher neighborhood, and I had a lot of things. But, I want to say I really had a lot of blessings, to be honest with you. I met a lot of great people, and independent of all the bad things that happened, probably more good than bad has happened to me in life. And so that gives me kind of a perspective of, I should give back and, make sure that I can mentor people and, at least give them my perspective on the world. Everyone's different, and I try to remind myself of that my path can't be the same as other people's paths. Everyone has to find their own. But sometimes as you're finding your path, and this was a hard thing for me because I lost my father when I was young.
Sorry to hear that.
It's hard. I had no one to call and say, "Hey, Dad, what should I do about this?" And so for me, I struggled many times to find mentors. And I had a few mentors that were good. I mentioned someone named Michael Godfrey. He was a very good mentor to me. And I mentioned Abbas El-Gamal. He was a great mentor to me. And so some of these people, I had some good mentors. But I also struggled. I didn't have someone there all the time, right? They're kind of there sometimes, not there sometimes, because if I was in school, I had a mentor. But then when I was in, through most of my life in companies, I didn't have a mentor, right? And so I just had to find my way through these things. So I look back on that and think to myself, and especially when I was young, my father died when I was 22, okay? And so I really wished that I had someone to ask questions like, should I do this? Should I do that? And so whenever I can give the kids advice or give other people advice, including you, Nor, I appreciate that because I say to myself, I wish someone was there to give me that feedback. And I may not be able to give you the perfect thing for you because I may not know what you need exactly, but at least I do my best. And at least I give you my perspective on it of what would I do or what have I seen other people do that I think is successful. And at least it gives you something to think about. It doesn't mean you need to do it or it's a requirement or anything, but I enjoy that time because I feel like if there's anything you can do in life, if you can give back to others and show give them some experiences that they don't have to have the same difficult experience that you did, there's some advantage in that. And I think many people appreciate it. Not everyone, some people don't appreciate it, but many people do.
Wow, that's wonderful, Boyd. I want to thank you for coming on.
Sure, no problem, Nor. I enjoyed myself. I think we used almost all the time now. We're going to maybe get lunch and then I'm going to have to run. So I wanted to run really, but we didn't get a chance to run.
But you got to promise me you'll come back on.
Sure, we can do that. We can talk about something else that you'd like to talk about. But anyway, yeah, I had a good time talking, Nor. I gave you kind of my whole life story almost.
I love it.
Maybe not every word, but yeah.
This is the goal of this podcast, is to story tell other people's stories, and young people, this is basically mentorship because you're sharing a story with other people. That way they know if they have it bad, or when one of your students who became your colleague told you, hey, you've got it good, you're working half the time and you're getting paid more, spend more time with your kids. This is a reminder for people to listen to what you're saying and understand, regardless of how bad it gets, count your blessings.
That's absolutely
Look at the good things you have in your life.
Look at the good things you have. I think people who suffer the most in life are the people who suffer mentally because of the fact that they are always unhappy that their glass is half empty. Mm-hmm. And, I've seen people who are in really bad shape, who, have spinal injuries and can't walk, okay? But they're very positive and they're like, hey, it's going to be better. And these people have a much better life than people who have, a hangnail and think, oh, well, I can't walk now because I have a hangnail and my whole life is over. And it's a very important perspective. And I do know that some people suffer from mental illness and there are many other reasons why people run into these issues. Mm-hmm. But I think that mental attitude is the number one thing. And I'll leave you with one last thought, Nor, before we finish the podcast. There's something I say every day at work. And I think it's a very important mindset, and I think it's something that's, for all the people who listen, it's something to think about. I come in every morning and I say, and people say, how are you doing, Boyd? And I say, today is another beautiful day. I don't care. If it could be gray outside, it could be snowing, it could be there could be an earthquake 5 minutes beforehand. And I say, today's another beautiful day. There's a reason why. It's not because I think that the sky is beautiful or I think that, earthquakes are awesome to have, or it's a mindset about how you get things done every day. Mm-hmm. If you wake up in the morning and say, today sucks, life's horrible, I don't know why I'm even getting out of bed. It's very difficult for you to be functional in life. It's very difficult for you to be successful in life. If every morning you wake up and say, today is another beautiful day, I can't wait to get out there and make it happen. Even if by the end of the day you're beaten down and you're like, okay, I'm in pain, it sucks, life's hard. It started right. And I tell people this because two things. One is when you're like this around other people, it's infectious. Other people start to say, okay, maybe today is a good day. But the other thing too is that the way success happens in life is one little tiny, it's a millimeter at a time. And that positive mindset every day is what allows you to step by step go from where you are to where you want to be. The moment you lose that, you lose your direction in life and you lose your ability to make those little steps it takes to be successful.
Wow, wonderful. God bless you, Boyd, again.
All right, Nora.
Thank you so much for coming on,
No
and
problem,
you promised
buddy.
to come again.
Yeah, I'll do that. No problem.
Appreciate that, Boyd.
I didn't even know this was the podcast room. I get here and you're like, I just want to record you. And I'm like, okay, here we go.
Well, now you know.
All right, Nora. Thanks.
Thanks, Boyd.
No problem. Okay, how about Nora? I take you to lunch and then I got to run.
Let's do it.
Okay, all right, that's good. You know a place around here that's a kebab place or something?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, I'm good. I haven't had kebab in